censorship was a huge reason in shaping what Bollywood is today.
Hey, like logic ends when drama begins.
Not only we are aspiration in terms of pushing the ideas, we're also rooted in reality and rooted in our culture. Welcome to Often Unexpectedly, a podcast where we discuss design and things we stumble upon often unexpectedly. I'm Sushant, an industrial designer based in Seattle.
I'm Gokul an industrial and interaction designer based in the Bay Area.
And today's podcast is about our love for Bollywood and Tollywood. We're going to talk about design and Bollywood and how those two fields influence each other. Gokul, what's your first memory of watching a movie? What was your first movie ever?
Let me think. Probably you know it, people like in the north probably know it as Indra the Tiger, but down in Tollywood it was just called Indra. But it was kind of set up in this like faction, masculine man backdrop, and it was just people with like sword fightings killing each other for like family revenge. That was honestly my first movie.
Man, that's insane. I only remember Indra the Tiger because of all the repeat telecasts on Sony Max and Star Gold and whatnot. Like during the daytime where like they'd just put movies on repeat. Like Nayak was one of them and Indra the Tiger and the movie with Mas as the main character. What's that called?
Yeah. Nagarjuna. It's called Maz actually, dude. I'm curious if I'm curious like the actors like Chiranjeevi in Indra and Nagarjuna from Maz are getting like they should be paid like huge royalties like for every rerun.
There's something to be said about like those kind of movies. Like Tarzan the Wonder Car is one of them, which just keeps coming on TV onto these like Sony Max and these kind of channels. Nayak, like I said, is one of them. I think these South Indian movies would be dubbed, at least the way the North Indians would interact with it.
Yeah. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask what your favorite movie is.
My parents told me that the first movie they ever took me to when I was a toddler was a movie called Andaz Apna Apna, which was, I think, an Amir Khan movie, or at least Amir Khan starred in it. I don't have any memory of it. The movie that I have clear memory of that left a very lasting impact on me was actually Koy Mil Gaya. Dude, it was Koy Mil Gaya,
man.
which I know is a fairly modern movie compared to my age, but still, like that movie is. I
modern
remember
movie.
I mean, it is right, like to have aliens in a movie compared to like when we talk about the first movie
modern,
ever.
Okay, like modern in terms of like until the subjects they were dealing with then is what.
Yes,
is,
and
like,
also just
modern,
like the visuals of a movie, like how the new era was more about like less overacting and more just. I mean, funnily enough, there was a lot of overacting in that movie. Now that I look back, but anyway, the themes in that movie were very future forward. Every scene I kind of like remember by heart because I've seen that movie at least 10 times.
Yeah, I actually, so like to set more context, like, most of my upbringing was down like in Andhra Pradesh in Nellore. And the only first time I got to even see a Hindi movie was during my boarding school around like second grade or something. And that's when I saw Kol Mil Gaya. And I would say like Kol Mil Gaya is my core Bollywood memory. Like there's something about that loser to hero arc that Hrithik Roshan goes to that resonated with every single dom kid in the boarding school. And
do you know what
that's a core memory.
The glaring error with that movie is Raj Singhania, who is the villain and supposed villain in that movie. That's a 6'6" monster, tall guy, handsome, wants to get the girl that Hrithik Roshan is going after. But the biggest problem I have with that movie is what is Raj Singhania doing with a basketball in a club? Why does he always have a basketball and that too in a dance club?
Let me say well then logic ends when drama begins. Okay, let's and it's interesting because we were talking yesterday just like about our experience with movies, and I actually said a word that I want to take back today is that I was like, yeah, you know like Indian movie, just like in general, there's a level of cringe to it, is what I said. But I want to take it back today, because I went back, looked at the definition of cringe, because I wanted to know the word I'm using, and it says having an inward feeling of acute embarrassment or awkwardness. I'm actually doing a disservice to all like the great directors of Indian film industry, whether it's like Tollywood, Kollywood, Bollywood. I never felt embarrassment or awkwardness sitting through any of that movie, like any of the movies till date. So like I probably I was trying to go with the popular rhetoric of like, oh shit, like Bollywood is cringe, but I never felt that like for one moment. Like the beats were always up.
Yeah, I think so. I feel, looking at the themes that Bollywood keeps sort of keeps close to them and always like rehashes them in certain ways. There's only like 5 to 10 stories you can tell, right? And these are stories of like rags to riches, man gets the girl that he wants,
Yeah.
or victory or
Man
triumph, or
versus
some sort of
system.
man versus system, man versus the corporate. Nationalism is
Man
a big
versus
theme as
nature.
well. Actually, nationalism was popularized during the 80s and 90s, and that's actually what led to this increased love for Bollywood, because a lot of the content was focused on India. There were war movies that made people feel like one, as you know, as we were defeating in 80s and 90s Pakistan as one of the
Yeah.
countries. But even like terrorism was one of the key features. So I think like just looking at how the actors, their roles have evolved from nationalism to more of a relatable character, and sometimes that make the stretch to this aspirational sort of human being, like the guy who's super handsome, the guy who's super smart in many cases, or somehow finds his way through.
I noticed something interesting in what you said is there is a freedom fighter called Sayya Narasimha Reddy. He was sort of like, when Britishers came back then, they were still kings everywhere, emperors. And um, during his freedom fight, dance groups used to go and spread the message of freedom. So what you mentioned about like it started like back in the day about like war movies and freedom, uh, and I think that's still prevalent in today's India, where in South a lot of movie stars have become chief ministers as well. I think even to an extent like Bal Thackeray wasn't, or he was at least involved on the sides of arts. Like there's something
Yeah.
between like being an artist and politics, and it's interesting that it kind of goes all the way back to freedom fighters, because I know a lot of people in the movie industry like who were actively in the independence movement. So that was just like a very interesting thing. As you were saying, like I was connecting the dots.
Yeah, and there's always been this, I feel, this homage to where we have come from, right? The themes of independence was a big one. The biggest movies in India that we have made are India's own struggles, right? Whether that is women empowerment, or whether that is our own independence, like Mangal Pandey, for example, or Lagan, for example, like brilliant movies that actually put India's story out there.
RRR is also about British.
I would say, yeah.
Isn't it funny?
I
mean, like, funny in the sense it's that same narrative.
I would give RRR the credit to still take the same theme and become one of the
Put it on steroids.
put it on steroids, make it go completely viral because of the over the top, it's
Yeah,
just
it
like
is
how
the highest.
Bollywood is with it.
Actually, I think Bahubali 2 is, but RRR is up there. Like, I wouldn't.
We can fact check that real quick. Wow. So in the top 10, we have, I'm looking at the stats now. In the top 10, we have at least 3 movies that were launched in the last year. So Pathan, RRR, and KGF. And for Tollywood to have, and Tollywood is also generalizing the southern industry, but RRR and KGF to be there.
You're going to be cancelled.
No, the fact that Bahubali, the first Bahubali came out in 2015 and it is still at number 11 has to say,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this like I want to give credit to, uh, was it SS Rajamouli?
Rajamouli,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, and he's the same guy who made RRR as well, which is
Yeah.
pretty insane.
And do you know, like on this, there's Bajrangi Bhaijaan. Rajamouli's father wrote the story for Bajrangi Bhaijaan
Wow.
as well. Yeah.
That's insane. So
So,
there's something to say about these like repeating themes, and when these themes find the right director, the right superstar, the right actor, when the combination comes together, this is not in terms of
yeah.
money, like highest grossing. This is like the impact it has. Like RRR has
Yeah.
been on many people's, like Hollywood people's, like radar. Like I've heard it from like American podcasters and like comedians talk about RRR, different thoughts, but the fact that it has reached and penetrated the whole world, that's insane to me.
Yeah. See, that's kind of, again, we have to go back to the main topic of how heroes evolved. But last thing I want to say is it kind of talks about the sentiment and emotion that's very common to everyone, right? Like I was reading this book on storytelling, which actually Tony Fidel says, or I think I butchered his name.
Tony Faddle.
Yeah. Tony Faddle, he mentions a book about like storytelling, but in that one, the author kind of mentions about think global and act local, or the vice versa. But I think that's what RRR does. It takes like core sentiments and core themes and symbology that's very near and dear to like Indians, but the emotion behind it is pretty much universal, and I think there's something to say about that. But now let's get on to the evolution. Do you want to talk about like Bollywood's evolution first, and then I could kind of compare like the parallel with South?
Yeah, cool. So I did a bit of research, and one of the things that stood out to me is just what we're talking about, the relationship of nationalism with Bollywood and how that came about, especially when we were hitting independence close to the 1950s era, right? Or so sorry, in the 1940s and 1950s. So pre 1947, everything was under British, which means that is actually called the studio era, where all the studios, movie studios, art studios that existed, they were all speaking to each other, but they were all governed by the British. So that means there wasn't truly our own voice there. And after independence, two things happened. One, people found their own voice and they wanted to amplify it. So Bollywood, for example, specifically Mumbai, a lot of actors started like directors came together to promote art in Bollywood. But one thing happened pretty soon is government realized that we can't just let people have free reign. So they came up with censorship. Censorship was a huge reason to define in shaping what Bollywood is today. I'll explain. So back then, any sexual acts or any hints, suggestions towards kissing someone, touching someone wasn't celebrated. So in the 50s, because of our heritage, our culture, religion, having expressive amounts of freedom to represent kissing, sex, these themes weren't allowed. So government came in and said that this can't be in a movie. So now what happened was Bollywood still had to reflect romance somehow, still had to reflect love somehow. So what they did was they started to sort of overly overly act and use their body language to communicate these feelings. So that's why you see those shoulders shrugging, those overly expressive eye movements and body language, people crossing each other and barely touching, and dupatta of a girl gets stuck on the guy's whatever, like a pin. So this was the birth of this exaggerated body language, which you can argue is still like an aesthetic for Bollywood. That is its own aesthetic.
And think about this. Like as you were speaking, I noticed something, right? Like, to do with like not kissing, not romancing on screen, India just getting independence. Not just was it this expressive protagonist, hero, actor and actress, it was also the rise of the idealistic hero. Like India just got its freedom. They want to be on the best foot to show in front of the world, right? It almost prompts me to say like all these signals pointed, and the sentiment of the society almost wanted an idealistic person, especially in a nation that's just started building. Interesting.
Definitely. And so going forward, like you'd have the perfect faces to reflect that as well. Shashi Kapoor, Rishi Kapoor, Amitabh Bachchan during the 70s and 80s, like really coming up and carrying the industry by their, I guess, the looks and the aura, right? Amitabh Bachchan, probably the tallest actor that Bollywood had seen, and that became such a statement in itself, right?
Amitabh Bachchan almost marked a new era in filmmaking. Is more so that like angry young man from that idealistic this thing. But what do you? Because I'm not sure like when exactly Amitabh Bachchan started acting. But do you have like any information about that brief period from between independence to when people like Javed Akhtar, Amitabh Bachchan started? Like all the movie veterans right now started coming in. Yes, Chopra.
So I think Amitabh Bachchan might have started in late 60s or 70s, but let me fact check that.
Yeah, it's not that far from independence. Like,
yeah, and the another point here is that before, let's say like before 40s and 30s, I might be completely wrong here, but the era before movies with actual sound and script and dialogue started, there was an era of just mute movies or movies which just had music or basically no dialogues, right?
That's probably why they had to be more expressive, like you said, as well. Like there were no BGMs, like background musics back then.
So then, like going from that time to body language to now voice, this was a very interesting era because newer technology enabled people to sort of communicate and record in studios and whatnot, right? And there was a whole ecosystem being built around just acting and recording and directing. Like there was like studio rooms where sound was recorded separately. There were green rooms where effects were added, and these were like film effects, like not like digital effects, like analog effects on top of the tapes. So this is a very interesting time where technology started penetrating Bollywood, and actors like I would want to give credit to Amitabh Bachchan because he used his voice really well. So something that you said, angry young man, he was actually known for both his aura and his voice. Of course he has a very recognizable voice, and that sort of led to this so Bollywood anyways larger in than life, and the stars are they're at a stage where they're almost gods and deities almost, right? Like if I have to generalize how big they are, like Bollywood is almost like a religion. So
no, that's true. Like Sharukh Khan, like Salman Khan, or like even Amitabh Bachchan and people down south there, I've seen so many interviews where they call them demigods. Like that's how their fans worship them and treat them. But
so the point I was trying to make is when Amitabh Bachchan came in, and especially because of his voice and aura, had such a deep impact on the industry. Moving forward in the 1990s, 91, technology was even more accessible to people, and it's not just like movie director technology or like capturing audio and stuff like that. It's more that people were becoming more global. So music cassettes were being sold. Movies had different ways of advertising itself, which obviously penetrated the TV and so on. And during that time, actors, maybe this might be the late 80s to early 90s, actors like Sharukh Khan came about, right? And what they brought was a different idea of a face, let's say, or a person that we should, persona that we should idolize. And he had this nice boy, sort of younger generation, boy next door kind of persona. At the same time, like he had a very unique sort of flavor to his acting, the way he'd say things or his body language. And again, this was homage to everything else that we had seen so far: voice, face, aura, and body language, right? And this, I would even argue that he took a lot from actors like Dev Anand and Amitabh Bachchan, but
Yeah.
don't quote me on it. Sharukh Khan obviously is a legend, but do you remember that time, that 90s to 2000, before we got into the actual modern era?
Yeah, I mean, I was only born in 98, so I can't speak to it. But from what I keep hearing in interviews, is definitely kind of similar to what you were saying, right? Is there was like romance movie had its own scope, like Devanand, Rishi Kapoor's father, and like like Raj Kapoor. All of them were, but Amitabh Bachchan was still on the top. Like Angry Young Man was the narrative that was bringing in, that was the masala movie, like commercial movie, like from Sholay. That's when like this commercial movie thing kind of started. So Amitabh Bachchan was still peaking, and I think like when that shift happened, the 91 globalization and everything started. That's when like Sharukh Khan and all started coming, because that's when urbanization also started to happen, right? You didn't have to. It's that like you've got, the country has got its freedom, and lot has happened since, and now it's more so about uh, like about urban stories and going outside of India.
So what is interesting that happened in 1991 is not just the fact that Bollywood just grew in general, the fact that so many actors with different personas are now involved, and what is now involved with Bollywood, and what that led to is these sort of like collective family movies, like which were very focused on celebration. While there were themes of like nationalism and like war, for example, Border that came out in 1997, that was already there. There was this like other era of movies like Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge,
Wow.
and
You're the last person that should be butchering this. between us two. Between us two.
oh man, it was an interesting era, mostly because Shah Rukh Khan was at its peak. By peak, I mean he did Bazigar 1993. He also did another movie called Kabhi Haan Kabhi Na, which I would imagine would have done well, but not as well as Bazigar. But that was the rise of Shah Rukh Khan in the start of the 90s, and then towards the end of the 90s. Like, I would argue that was his peak. But what is getting interesting here is that if you just look at the top 20, 30 movies that came between the 90s and 1990s and 2000s, you will notice that there are varying themes and new actors are popping up. New actors like Hrithik Roshan. Actually, he came right towards the end in actual 2000. Kaho Na Pyar Hai.
Yeah.
And there are other actors who are finding their own niche. For example, Sanjay Dutt, right? Sanjay Dutt was doing movies like Sadak in early 90s. There's also other actors like was that Sunny Deol, right? Like I mentioned, Border. Sunny Deol was finding his own niche. Like what is his voice? Like what would he do? So this was a very interesting time when it was not only just family celebration movies, but all these varied themes coming in, and that's where like people started really just getting into that fandom idea. Like, I'm a fan of Salman Khan, or I'm a fan of Shah Rukh Khan, or I'm a fan of Hrithik Roshan, because these are all different personas, right? Like somebody who's a Sunny Deol fan may not be let's say a Shah Rukh Khan fan. Like, it's just because they're so loud and very focused personalities. Did something like that happen in Tollywood as well, where when the range of actors become popular, it's almost like this versus that?
Oh man. Well, I can speak to the Tamil industry and Telugu industry, but just to set some context, like the parallel that was happening back in the South was kind of similar, where in the starting, like post independence, there were a lot of slice of life movies where it was like lighthearted. It was dispute between brothers, or man trying to trying to find or get stable in his life, trying to pursue a job and things like that. Very interpersonal relationships, and a lot to do with poetry. And then came, while you guys had sort of your Sharukh Khan era, we started to kind of shift from that slice of life to commercial movie, or like mass movies, masala movies, whatever name you'd like to use. And our focus was like more on that side, where probably the top grossing movies were it's in fact Chiranjeevi, the actor from Indra. He did a movie called Kaidi. So it was changed from that idealistic hero to non-idealistic hero, and he's technically not a hero. He was a guy who's in jail. Like Kaidi means, a jailed. I don't know what's the word for a jailed person. A convict.
Prisoner?
He was a convict. Prisoner. Okay, he was and then so that was sort of the evolution I saw from the 1900s to early 2000s, where it was more, and something interesting was happening both in Bollywood and Tollywood, and pretty much all the movie industries were like that romance thing. But something that was common in the mass movies down south and the romance, like I'd like to call it YRF core or Karan Johar core, like that aesthetic of drama and like high drama and really good songs, is all the songs or movies, whenever there was an incentive to go outside and shoot the country, whether it's for a song or whether it's for the scene, that was very popular, because again, globalization, and a lot of people couldn't afford to go out, and Bollywood was sort of their window to that life. When you see actor and actress in a location in like a foreign backdrop, those like, now you need like really sick VFX, but back in the day, it's like if you shoot a song in front of the Malaysian Twin Towers, people will come back to the movies for that song, because they're not going to get that kind of content anywhere, right? Like Doordarshan was just doing news and like
I feel
movie
they did
once
a lot.
a week.
They did a lot with Salman Khan, Hrithik Roshan, Sharukh Khan, especially Karan Johar, like you mentioned, was known for this. And he started because Kuch Kuch Hota Hai was his first movie, so in 1998, I'm guessing that's when he started. Quick trivia for you. Do you want to guess how old Rani Mukherjee was when Kuch Kuch Hota Hai came along?
Like what, 20? 21?
19.
Oh, close. Yeah, that was fair. That was a fair, like, a lot of great, like Sridevi started, I think, when she was 16, and Savitri, she's like a legendary actress. She also started at a young, I think that was a fairly common trend where women's entry into film was actually like in a very young age back in the day.
Yeah, it's very interesting looking at how now today it's a very different story with the age gap between male actors and female actors, especially when there's like romance and stuff.
Well, like that topic is for another day. When we have to like unpack social norms of Indian society to address that.
So a couple of things from the 90s to the 2000s, these family oriented movies were coming up, but there was a lot of aspiration, like you mentioned. Aspiration in terms of the actors, the personas that they're portraying, as well as the stories that they're telling. College life abroad, or larger than life celebrations, or stories of victory, getting the dream girl you want, right? So there was a lot of that. There was also this influence from Western Hollywood coming in, or Western lifestyle and Hollywood coming in, which is fashion. Fashion was evolving, even though there were still bell bottoms. Hear me out. We were still like putting actors in a situation where they have to wear denim, and women of our country, like, for the first time, were wearing t-shirts and shorts, right?
Yeah, and Saif Ali Khan was wearing these really tight leather pants in Dil Chahta Hai, right?
That's
Like,
Salman Khan. Salman Khan's pants were
yeah,
always so tight.
yeah, yeah. I think that was that had a lot, in fact, to do with like the design of Bollywood. I think fashion plays a huge role. I think that's probably for any industry, but I don't think it was the same case anywhere else but Bollywood, where fashion played a huge role in just like in their craft of filmmaking. Um, like I've seen South movies where the hero had literally had the same attire for like 3 movies straight, like no change in like dressing or things like that. So yeah, there's something interesting there about the whole fashion aspect. And like when you look at Sharukh Khan or Saif Ali Khan, they were like very fashion forward. People like Hrithik Roshan's posters were up there, like wearing denim jacket and denim pants. So yeah.
Awesome. So, just quickly to wrap this up, from the 90s to 2000s was, I guess, the real modern era, even though the Bollywood modern era actually goes from like 70s, 80s onwards, and we are still in the modern era. But for somebody like me, born in the 90s, I really see like the quality of aesthetics has changed, the level of storytelling has evolved. It's less cringy. The body language are a little bit more controlled because of all these influences from Hollywood, because of the audience maturing, the education, the expectations all maturing. So some of the movies that came out in this era were actually the first time, I would say, that Indian movies went to like this massive Hollywood scale. Movies like Three Idiots came out, and alongside that, Chak De India came out. Shahrukh Khan's obviously one of the biggest movies he has done. Lagan, that was 2001 when it came out. Lagan was hugely successful globally. And there's something to do with like Amir Khan's movies that just generally do well globally, like PK, for example, even though it came out later, was very successful in China and the East. But this was also the era where there were a lot of like alternative genres. So when I say alt is slightly different, not the norm, not the family, not the Karan Johar kind of movie, not the expected romance
Yeah.
story. So that means movies like Rock On came out. Rock On was 2008, one of my favorite movies. Dil Chahta Hai came out early in 2001. And movies like Munna Bhai, MBBS. This was the start of an era where people were trying to really just change the norm. Like comedy was done a different way, even though Hera Fairy, the original Hera Fairy, came out like I think 1999 or 2000, I want to say. Like the kind of comedy changed to becoming less about body language and jumping around to more actual storytelling, to more smarter dialogues. And I think this is all just an indication of the audience maturing. The actors are still
Yeah.
the same though, but they're taking
It,
a different
it
role.
surprising you said that. So like the comedy kind of before was like farce comedy. That's the name for it, where there is no specific storyline. It's just multiple bits of funny incidents. Just and there's like a very loosely held narrative. And they're actually making a comeback in Telugu, and which is like it's kind of like interesting you said that. But do you, what do you think um are sort of like these building blocks of Bollywood? Like now that we've discussed about the heroes and like how they've evolved, let's like kind of get into like what do you think makes a Bollywood movie a Bollywood movie?
So, what separates Bollywood from Hollywood is the fact that there's a bit of everything. At the core, there is fantasy, right? The stories that we tell are a little bit, like I said, larger than life, a little bit future forward, a little bit unreal to be, or like too good to be true. But there is some sense of relevance in it. Like, yes, I can see that happening. And that is what excites most of the people. But the fact that most Bollywood movies don't stop there, they add romance, they add drama, they add action, they add thrill, they add adventure to it, they add comedy to it. Every movie that I've seen has at least 5 to 10% of each. There's not one movie where there is only one particular theme, everything aligns like that. For some reason Bollywood loves to like mix these complex genres together, right?
Yeah.
Like Hollywood on the other end is really good at like having one genre, focus on that, make it the best piece. But Bollywood has everything, which is what I love, like having these complex problems, complex themes, and just packaging that in a very easy to understand manner.
Yeah, I think all like it is kind of the same in Tollywood as well. Is But we were probably more so, like I said, like mainly we had a fair share of like romance scripts, but I don't think it was as like the amount like Bollywood was pumping out. But whether or not they were romance or romance based, or mainstream movies, commercial movies, they had like all those elements, which is like drama, romance, they've got a fight, and sometimes there's in you know physics left the chat kind of movies. Something I kind of wanted to get into was the theme of homage to roots, right? Like, especially when I was growing up watching movies in like Telugu and Tamil, there was something always that was tying back to the either like the director or hero's roots, or kind of like the native roots. How is it like in Bollywood? Like, are there like some good examples?
So at the very core, Bollywood loves to um, sort of express the Indian culture, or let's say the global Indian culture, which means it's not about the caste or a religion or a language. It's just like what our history is, what a general stereotypical understood concept is, like the unsaid concept. So things like superstition, right? Indian culture, just generally, no matter where you are, we're big on superstition. Like a black cat crosses your path, that means it's bad luck. And movies are really good at sort of highlighting those little details that everybody connects to. Similarly, there's a deep influence from art and dance. So you'd see like the item numbers that happen today, even though they seem very tacky, the actual movements that they do are inspired by mudras that were, like from classical dance, Indian classical dance. So these mudras are reflected in a very modern light, but obviously in a different context. I also love the use of like idioms, like when people take references or say a phrase which is commonly known in the Indian society. There's even stuff like temples or religion or just belief in God as an understood concept that people will pray. Like I haven't seen many Hollywood movies where it's an understood concept that everybody talks about Christianity.
Like Christianity is mixed with Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible. Yeah, no, I kind of agree. Like even in Sprout, right? Even down in South, there's this. There's symbols in movies where the hero kind of dies in front of the temple, or a religious place, and he comes back to life because of again, it's like mix of that mythic like religion and then like contemporary stories, and that especially those themes were sort of like very prevalent. And another thing I wanted to talk about roots is like how you're talking about songs, and I don't know how it is in Bollywood, but there was this one interview where Anupama Chopra, like a famous film critic, was asking Nagarjuna, funnily, the actor from Mass, about item songs, right? Like they have a negative connotation in society just in general, but the item songs are very close to the roots of the society, like rural society back in the South, in the sense like they're folklores. Like people sing, like a wife used to sing while she was kind of farming with her husband. And because the colloquial transformation, the colloquial translation always doesn't land well in English, that's why like people might find it cringe. But those are actually like those are like folklore songs with like a modern beat. Like it was like these songs were around like love and about relationship in the marriage and stuff like that. Sometimes it had themes of sorrow, and so those went on to become item songs, and they're still like part of like mainstream movies like down south, whether it's Telugu, Tamil, or like even Malayalam, Kannada. That was something that was interesting to me when we talk about like roots.
I love the fact that movies, no matter where they are, they can be a window both towards history and roots, but also a window towards the future, a window towards the world. And I think Bollywood and Tollywood, what they do really well is for the common folk, because you mentioned villagers and people who don't have access to the urban sort of like, you know, luxuries like internet and access to information. For them, the only window to the world is movies, because every village or every sort of like town has at least one TV or one screen where or even like a cinema hall. Like that's how widely spread Bollywood is. The fact that these movies are not just for entertainment, but that's actually a source of information, source of knowledge for them, right? So people who are not in the metro cities like Mumbai and so on, those guys use movies to sort of educate themselves of what life would be like outside India, or what life was like back when they weren't born, or like you mentioned,
Yeah,
the
that
roots.
almost um again, that almost is a mix of multiple things, right? It's about that demigod status and also like responsibility of the star, to kind of give, like, if they're giving any discourse in the movie, it was important for them to keep it very, again, going back to those topics we discussed in the start, like it had to be idealistic. It had to be something around like a good morale for them to like take away. And that's a recurring theme in like big star like commercial movies down south, is to send them with like a good discourse or like a good message, about there's always this education. Like I learned about like voting rights and things like that from like a political movie. And like I learned about phone tapping from like a movie. Like that's a technology I didn't even know like people could do like back in the day.
Dude, I learned about
It,
aliens through Koy Mil Gaya.
You probably learned about the supercomputer which makes the weird sound om om om.
Too bad
I mean,
that day.
dude,
Too bad that day. India lost a legend, Rakesh Roshan, in his flipped car.
dude, honestly, like I want to take that computer and run Keyshot on it and see what it's made of. If it could
Do you
summon
know?
Jadoo, it better render my Keyshot rendering with caustics and global
Do
illumination.
you? So this is actually a very well known fact. The computer that was actually shown in that movie, the the mega computer where Rakesh Roshan and his set of engineers came up with the sound and the technology to sort of interact with the aliens. That computer still to date is used in all Chat GPT-3 servers. So actually, that is known. I wanna get into sort of this area of the podcast where I have to ask you, what are your top three movies and why? Let's go one each. Why don't you start?
Okay, like because I told you it's my first movie, because it's my core memory, it takes the top spot. Indra.
Why is Indra your favorite movie? No, wait. I wanna dig deeper and I wanna ask why.
I there's I, I'm probably not the best person to articulate it. Is there was something about like the heroism aspect and how they elevate the hero in Indra. I don't know if you remember the story well. Like there's this one fight scene where he gets down from the helicopter. Like the train is on the tracks, the helicopter like slowly lands on the tracks, and the camera is like from the bottom, and his legs are like stepping up. Like that kind of elevation is it literally makes you smile. I know it's a good elevation in movies when there's like a small smile on my face when I see like the hero thriving or like kind of winning, that I think that sort of elevating the hero is still like very like in KGF, like that's what happened. So I think like that's why Indra is for being my core memory and my first introduction to commercial masala movies.
Great. I love it. My
What
experience
about
with
you?
Indra is only on Sony Max repeat telecast. So I have
What
seen the
about you?
movie in bits and pieces. Yeah, so for me, like you, the first movie I ever saw, Koy Mil Gaya, has to be up there. Uh, the reason is simple, man. It exposed me to so much in just one movie: aliens, spaceships, science, uh,
Romance?
like girlfriends, romance, yeah, and also
Bonvita?
like mental issues, Bonvita, uh,
Oh yeah.
cricket. Out of all the things,
Yeah.
Raj Singhania, man, that guy actually such a douchebag. But the whole, like I said, like Bollywood is a mix of everything. And even though the plot was simple, alien comes in, gives superpowers to Hrithik Roshan, and now it transforms his life. There's still so much going on, which I love. I love the little monologue by Rekha, where she actually goes to Preeti Zinta and her friends and tells them that why why she's okay with the fact that her kid isn't like everybody else. That's
Mm.
such a like
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's a moment where I was like,
Yeah, I think
as a fourth grader, I was like shook. Like, shit, man. If somebody says
yeah,
that to me, holy shit, I shouldn't be rude to people.
that's true. I think that's probably why like I saw it when I was in second grade, and that's probably why it kind of struck a chord with me. Is like it's still around. It was like sort of in that kids arena space, like and that was probably why it was like so relatable. And I think as a kid you always have this need to sort of being the popular one, or you like personally you would crave for that kind of arc from being a loser to hero.
Yeah,
And you're kind of like mom backing up for you, like your parents being there for you, like being understanding. And those are all sentiments probably like every kid shares wherever he was,
yeah,
he or she
yeah,
was,
yeah.
and like watching that movie. I was gonna say my second movie would actually be RRR. I would tear my shirt to promote that movie. It's up for Oscar nomination for Best Original Song. Oh man, I think it was a sense of pride, like being again the movie coming from Tollywood. But again, it is in it India owns that movie, but it was just nice to see Rajamouli get a global platform for his storytelling. That's probably more than like it being a Tollywood movie. It's like there were his previous movies like Magadira, Bahubali, which like the world was not ready for it. Like it still hadn't peaked, but it was just nice to see like be invested in his arc since he was a kid to like now. His first movie was with NTR, and I saw NTR's first movie, and it's just been a great journey. But what about you? What's your top
Okay, so
two?
I'm gonna go with Khosla Ka Ghosla, which was a very alternate movie back then, mid 2000s, starring Anupam Kher, Ranveer Shore, and a few other actors. The whole premise was that it was set in North India somewhere where, when you buy a land and property, you'd have a lot of like encroachers and squatters, and people eventually would just take that land under their name illegally. They were actually big sort of dacoits or, these frauds who would just take over your land, and then they wouldn't move because they would start construction on that land and say that we have all the right papers, you don't own this land. So now, because the actual owners now, they had to go to the police, they had to, go to the courts and figure their stuff out. It was a huge hassle. So basically, these like frauds who would take these
Yeah,
lands, they would just ask them for money. They're like, you know what, pay us like the price you paid for the land, and it's yours. And the whole movie is actually conning those frauds, being like how can you make that fraud pay
how
up or
can
give up that land which is already
yeah
yours. So it's a
yeah
roundabout way
yeah
of
how
doing
can
things, and
you
it's like
make a fraud convict, uh like fool a fraud
a
or
mistake.
like
Yeah,
bait a
exactly,
fraud? Yeah,
exactly. 100%. And I love
that's
that movie.
interesting.
Anupam Kher at its peak. Ranveer Shore is one of his earlier performances. Brilliant, brilliant. Family chemistry was insane. My dad loves that movie as well. Actually, he introduced me to it. I love how vulnerable some of the scenes are, where like you actually feel it's a comedy, but you feel like really emotional. Like, what if that happened to me? What if all my life savings actually, if I it disappeared overnight? Anyway, I've spoken too
And
long. What's your third one?
my last one, actually, I was thinking hard about this. Is actually a Junior NTR's movie called Arvinda Sameta. But like how I was telling with Indra, it started with this faction backdrop, like pride killings, family revenge, where one family in the town or city kills another family over you know, like egos. But Arvind Sameta movie picks up from after the hero wins, or like after that fight happens, like the aftermath of it discusses about like how the women are impacted. Like it's just like men taking swords and going to like fight, right, like over stupid egos. And like women usually, like in the movie, like in that world, like women don't have a say, or like they don't have power over like stopping the man from going and fighting these like trivial things on the scale of like, when even the scale of that district or state. So that was like a good movie. It was like sort of closing the loop, like an end of an era for me. Like, no, I don't think like probably people will touch that subject, but maybe in a different way. But it was like what started then, that when I was born, like my first movie, that was the theme. It kind of ended with him closing the circle, like discussing the aftermath. That entire movie is based on the aftermath. So that, I think, is like my third one. But what about
when
you?
when did you watch this movie?
This is
How
relatively
old were
new. I
you?
would say like 2019.
Okay.
So by then, I've already done like 2 reruns of all the old movies. I've started to understand like equations like caste and things like that. What, like many things like that. So that's why it was the right movie for the right time. Like I was the audience kind of consuming that kind of content, and this movie came and he's like, hey, look at the aftermath, look at the nuance of like what happens after that. But yeah,
Cool.
what about you?
Um, Last movie for me, top three. It's gonna be uh, Wednesday. So Wednesday it
Mm,
stars Nasruddin Shah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
again mid 2000s movie, had a lasting impact on me because of, I think it was the first time I'd seen such a simple movie done in a very nuanced and like very detailed manner. Uh, Otherwise, Bollywood generally has a lot of themes going on. Here, the theme was that a simple man has planted a bomb somewhere, or at least claims to. He calls the police station. He lets some reporters know that huge blasts are going to happen if you do not let go of four captured terrorists, or something like 3 or 4 captured terrorists that are in the jail somewhere. The whole
Mm-hmm.
premise sort of like goes into how he's able to convince people that something bad is going to happen to Mumbai if they don't let this happen. So the police and the media, then all this, the whole movie is around like how one guy is actually calling all the shots, and finally they release these 4 people, and they are sort of asked to be positioned very particularly around an airport or some sort of open field,
Yeah.
and that's where
Oh, okay,
uh,
okay, okay, okay. I've
that's
seen
where
I've seen the movie actually, as you're
he
telling.
actually blows them up. Yeah, he blows them up right at the end, those terrorists, because the whole premise is that um, you know the Indian system doesn't do much. These
Yeah,
people are going to keep attacking, keep doing things from the inside. This cycle is going to complete, so we have to teach them a lesson. And if the police is not
yeah,
going to do much, a common man will. And the whole idea is like how a common man actually does it and says that I didn't really plant any bombs. Uh,
yeah. It was
so that
interesting
was
because,
interesting. Yeah.
again, on the society level, that's sort of when like the bomb blasts happened. Like, but terrorism was a rhetoric in the media and discourse,
Yeah.
like globally and in India wise as well. And our economy, our country has had like almost a good 50 to 60 years of independence by then. And that's when like the whole, like there was, BJP is not sponsoring this podcast, but there was this sort of like very strong sentiments towards like Congress government, and that's when this man versus system movie started coming up, right? Like lawyer fighting for the minority, and yeah, so it's just very interesting to like just we can sit an entire day and like decode like, hey, like what are the popular movies or like impactful movies, and like what was the public sentiment and like behavior back then.
Have you seen Hera Fairy?
Dude, I haven't, but I want to see it because I just started the whole like watching all the comedy franchises in Hindi. I just finished Golmaal, finished Houseful, and next is Hera Fairy.
So, have you heard of the movie Ranji Rao Speaking?
No.
So
What about it?
apparently, Hera Fairy is actually inspired by Ranji Rao Speaking, which is I think it's a movie from 1989, Malayalam movie. I
Ramji Rao.
think Ramji Rao, yeah, Ramji Rao Speaking.
Oh, I actually know these actors. They're still acting, all of them.
So like you said, you want to visit Bollywood. My thinking now is that I should probably see like all the inspired Bollywood movies, what the original movies are. So I haven't seen the original Drishyam. I want to do that.
That's
I
a
want to
part
see
3 for
Ramji Rao
itself.
Speaking.
That's a part 3 part. Hey, we have taken our fair share from Bollywood as well, so like no dissing there.
I think there is something that Tollywood is doing great. But one more point I wanted to make. This is probably something that I'd edit in the center is, with the rise of OTT platforms, the content has changed from that stardom big hero to more of a relatable, simple, cleaner story. And this is like daily stories with people that you can really just like next door person or like a relatable person.
I'm kind of see, I love OTT, but I'm on the camp of like not having like of having stardom. I think it's to an extent it's like everyone's celebrating, oh, like it's no more the actor, it's the content. And probably like from Bollywood, Sharukh Khan is last of the stars. And I think like even in Tollywood, this like like Allu Arjun, NTR, that's kind of like last of them. There's something about having stars in an industry that you won't get from a high content movie plus star power is what I think like for me main course Indian cinema, like mainstream Indian cinema special, and there's like a part of me that wants it to like stay until my grandkids.
I do think like the mainstream big cinema movies, they struggle to show these more day-to-day stories, like more humble people, lesser known actors, where acting is the key here. Those movies don't get a lot of like mainstream attention, mostly because why would you go to cinema to really see a story that's like mostly mundane, right? So most people go for that larger than life experience, and OTT is where you go for the more mellowed down mundane experiences. And the more I think to myself, it actually makes sense that during COVID, OTT was at its peak, and Bollywood cinemas, nobody was actually, because cinemas were shut, right? So nobody was actually going to see the movies. And now that they're trying to make a comeback, movies like Pathaan sort of like celebrating it, no better way to do it than to put Sharukh Khan on screen. And I would even argue that Deepika Padukone and John Abraham at that level, like John Abraham, right? Like he's always been he's a star, but is he like a Shahrukh Khan star?
No, he's
like,
he's not. He's not the Badshah. Yeah.
the same year Chak De India came out, Goal came out. But what did people see? Chak De India. But like there's Goal was an equally
Yeah,
powerful
no, I
movie.
get your point. I think like Shahrukh Khan is like a league of like he's an industry all to himself. Like that's a business. Like Shahrukh Khan
Yeah,
is a
I agree.
business by itself. Yeah, and last thing I wanted to mention is like a bit about franchise. Is like we can quickly talk about franchise. You pointed out to me yesterday about like how you probably want to see like Bollywood making more franchise. Like, do you want to talk about it? I have an interesting perspective I was thinking about. Go ahead.
Well, my gut reaction was that we need to find our own Harry Potter. We need to find our own Fast and Furious. What we did to get that is something like Doom or Race or Brahmastra now is actually starting to get into that zone. But we need to find our Avengers, and I think that not only will celebrate actors in a new way, like give actors the sort of the theme or the persona that they can truly embody, but that will help the Indian cinema like tell these micro stories in a very playful sort of like a fantasy or very different environment where right now the stories are a bit literal.
Yeah, I've been thinking like I know yesterday I mentioned that in the South, like sequels are not that, probably KGF and Pushpa and Bahubali, they're very like recent, but they're like one single story. So we wouldn't, there's no like franchisee or happening, more world building. And I said like I'm not a big fan of sequels, but then I took a step back and I looked at like what does franchisee mean for India and like what does franchisee mean for Hollywood? Like in India, like for example, like between race 1 and 4, it's not the same characters continuing. It's a different. It's literally the title is the same, but the story, the world building, everything changes, right? But that's what I like. Only recently, right now, like with Vikram and Kaidi of from the Tamil industry, we are starting to see even with Patan is like world building franchise happening. So it's not unlike Hollywood where it's an intellectual property. It's not like a Spider-Man or something like that. Like the key difference you have to notice between Hollywood and Indian film industry is Hollywood is more so like franchises are based on IP. Star Wars,
Yeah.
Andor, Dandor, I'm sorry guys, I'm not a great Star Wars intellect. But what makes Indian franchise difference is it's based on the star and that world building. Like that's why Ekta Tiger and Patan work, and that is something that doesn't happen much in like we have Mission Impossible and what's a recent Tom Cruise movie? I forgot.
Top
Top
Gun.
Gun. Yeah, but I think that happens more often so in India, and I honestly want that to keep repeating, so that my hopes for that never-ending star era lives on, and you're getting like really good franchises.
Perfect. I want to summarize again like what we have talked about, what makes Bollywood so exciting, and how we can draw parallels to design. I'm just going to quickly go through 5 points which I think really resonate with designers and Bollywood and how they take from each other. So, one, Bollywood is great at taking complex themes and distilling it down to a very simple, easy to understand film. Sometimes that's longer, 3 hours, sometimes that's shorter, but mixing up fantasy, romance, drama is a challenge, which Bollywood does really well. Second, Bollywood focuses on very strong storytelling. Our technology, our CGI, our visual effects cannot compare to Hollywood, but that is our superpower where storylines, acting, the superstardom, the perceived sort of theme building, the world building, I think that is what our strength is. So that means flashy aesthetics are not going to save a horrible story. Third, most Bollywood stories have aspirational positioning, which means that the stories that we tell excite people. They tell stories of fantasy. There's a healthy mix of fantasy. There's a healthy mix of triumph and victory towards the end, and everybody sort of feels like they want to be that guy. They want to be the hero. Number four, there's always homage to roots. Bollywood is great at having historical references, whether that be in the form of dance and art or actual culture related things like superstition, religious themes, respect for parents, culturally we are very sensitive to what we show. And which is actually a good thing, because not only we are aspiration in terms of pushing the ideas, we are also rooted in reality and rooted in our culture. And lastly, Bollywood talks about important topics, right? This is not like a story of a sci-fi like spaceship. No shade Star Wars, but India, most of Bollywood focuses on stories that now today teach people something, whether that is introducing people to a new foreign lifestyle or a Western culture, or whether that's introducing our own social issues, which might be, you know, women, work, corporate world, corruption, everything. Like it doesn't have to be good
Yeah.
or bad. It's just exposure to all these different themes. So that is my 5 pointer on why Bollywood and design are so equally uh, inspirational to each other.
All right. So now for naming the podcast, probably the most important thing we do in every podcast.
Oh man.
What are you thinking? Dude, we should do a clickbait one. A lot of the reviews have a clickbait one, like nepotism, like we should have nepotism,
We should have a
Bollywood
face as
cancel.
well.
Yeah, it's like shocked. Like we should have like Sharukh Khan in the background and like Gandhiji next to him and like that gasped reaction and say what you never knew about Bollywood and patriotism. Like with that would be that's like the clickbait title.
History of Bollywood. And, no, I think I've been doing all of these.